All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Geeks of Rage podcast. And today I have a fellow content creator and also community member, none other than Mr. Immortal Afro. How are you doing this evening, brother?
I am doing well. I am doing swell.
Doing swell.
How about you?
I'm doing great. So today we are going to be starting part one of, I don't know how many parts it's going to take, but nonetheless, part one of the series that I wanted to do, which is going over the console wars, starting with the NES, battling it out with the Genesis. And boy, was that a time to be living. And I know, Immortal, you're a little bit younger than myself, but I will say, speaking for myself, even me being born in 86, I at least got to experience, I was like, I guess you could say my brain can vividly remember like the middle of the console war. So like I got my Genesis going into what would be 93 going into 94. So it would have been Christmas 93 going into 94. And from that point on, I have a complete vivid memory of stuff that was going on back during those times. But did you, before we get started, did you have any sort of vivid memories of even maybe like the tail end of that era, or not really?
Well, one of the advantages I had was like my parents weren't very fond of games, but the few games we got, we played them a lot. And I got, I spawned in 90, the year of 1990. And my first console was the NES. And we had a few games we played there, but the ones I have the most vivid memory, because at this point I was like maybe, I'd say like 5, 6, 7 is when you start to remember stuff from that time.
Right.
And I have fond memories of the NES. Didn't have an SNES, but we did have a Genesis. So the Genesis was, I kind of dubbed that as like my first real console that I was, fully aware and I was locked in. I saw Sonic and I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is all me right here. So we had plenty of games. We had the old back when Disney made games, had Aladdin, The Lion King, Jungle Book, which I really like the Jungle Book. That was probably my favorite out of all the Disney games.
Oh yeah, I mean the argument, or I guess you could say the comparison that people use, and it does make sense, is it typically ended up being that when you start talking to people as to why they liked one or the other, more often than not, you'll find out the ones that grew up with the Genesis ended up liking arcade style games more. And that's what kind of drew them in, is because like even myself, even though I wasn't much of a fighting game type, like arcade style play, I did like the aesthetics and sounds that came along with an arcade cabinet. And I always felt like that made the most sense. Like that was the vibe it gave me. And not to stroke it too much, but of course my favorite franchise in Streets of Rage, and Streets of Rage 2 especially, is like to me the epitome of an arcade style game on console. Has literally everything that you could ask for without being in an arcade cabinet. But yeah,
the experience was very, because now that I think about it, there was a lot of like Sega games that transitioned well into the arcade. Golden Axe, Ultra Beast, like you said, the Streets of Rage, which is your channel is based off of, obviously. And it's really cool because, like, to me, like back when, and this is something that I really miss. I wish it would come back, but I think the society needs to have a bit of a rebuilding of certain things before we can get it. But back when commercials and ads for the consoles would take shots at each other.
Oh yeah,
like Sega does what Nintendo don't.
Oh yeah,
and it's cheesy now, but to see that could have evolved over time. Now everyone pretends to be friends, like, Xbox games on the back PlayStation.
Yeah,
and we're all just la-di-da. It's just like
no. Exactly. those were the days, man. And so, without further ado, let's start off talking about the NES and what it was doing prior to the inception of the Genesis. So for those that don't know, Let me switch scenes here. All right, so now you guys can see what I'm seeing. So without me reading, I'm just going to mention. So 83 was the video game crash, and they thought that the video game market was dead. And then Atari was basically at that point in time the only home console, and it was not, even at that point, it was not doing well at all. And then the old NES decides to come around, because first you had the old Famicom in Japan, and then the NES was the American version of the Famicom. It was actually, I don't think it says it on this one. I think it was a different wiki. But the one that we had prior, it explained how Nintendo had to market the Nintendo Entertainment System as a toy and not a video game system or console. Because at that point in time, the American market was like anti-video game. Like, I don't want video games in my house. So they're like, well, it's not.
They're not feasible.
You're right. So they're like, well, this isn't video games. This is an entertainment system.
A toy.
It's a toy. Because they had
a toy box.
Right. They had the Rob the Robot. It's like, see, you play with Rob the Robot, and you do this, that, and the other thing. But that's how they marketed it, and then it eventually took off. And let's see here. I'm just trying to go in here I'm just reading real quick. Because, of course, they were in competition with Atari. So just going on, just says Nintendo targeted North American market, entering distribution negotiations with Atari to release a redesigned Famicom with Atari's name as the Nintendo Advanced Video Gaming System. The deal was set to be finalized and signed at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show in June of '83. However, Atari discovered at that show that its competitor, Coleco, was illegally demonstrating its Coleco Atom computer to Nintendo's Donkey Kong game. This violation of Atari's exclusive license with Nintendo to publish the game for its own computer systems delayed the implementation of Nintendo's game console marketing contract with Atari. Atari's CEO Ray Kassar was fired the next month, so the deal went nowhere, and Nintendo decided to market its system on its own. So I'm sorry, I'll correct myself there. It was not 83 for the North American deal. I just skimmed through and I seen the year, and I thought that that's what it was getting at.
For Japan, July 15th, 83. North America,
85.
October 18th, 85.
Yep, so there we go. So 1985, that's when it was released in New York, so the U.S., but it was in New York. It said the test markets was New York City, October 18th of 1985, followed by L.A., and then said the American nationwide release came September 27th of 1986. So I was a cool 1 month old.
Yeah.
Yes.
First time getting in.
Oh yeah.
Just in time for the release of Nintendo's first console.
Exactly. So it says Nintendo released 17 launch games, 10-Yard Fight, Baseball, Clue Land, which, wow, that name does not sound very good. Say that real quick and tell me what that sounds like. Clue Land. Just okay. So you know where I'm going with it. All right.
just so we keep it clean here on the interwebs.
Yes.
Don't want anyone
that's why I went, whoa, right. That was hold on here. Yeah. So
it was a different time.
Yeah. Duck Hunt, Excite Bike, Golf, Gyromite, Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Kung Fu, Pinball, Soccer, Stack Up, Super Mario Brothers, Tennis, Wild Gunman, and Wrecking Crew. So real quick, just touching on Excite Bike, I did a brief video about that, talking about how I felt it didn't age well. I do want to know, I'm not saying it's a terrible game, just like I said in that video. It's not a terrible game, but I wanted to point this out because there was a feature on that game that I thought was so innovative at the time, which was the create your own track aspect, that you had all the different things that you could do to create your own track to drive on. And up to that point, I don't think there was anything in video games that was remotely where you could customize stuff. So I just thought that was a little little note to add there.
Yeah, I didn't have Excitebike, but I started with Gyromite. But it is pretty cool that map editors or something to that, or track editors was a thing way back then. I would have never guessed, because that kind of gives players a little taste of the development process. It's like you can, create your own gameplay experience.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. That's very powerful.
Yeah, like that was I took it for granted as a kid, because the first time that I ever played Excitebike, I was only like probably 6, maybe 7. I think I was probably 6 when I played it, because I'm trying to think. I was probably like in the first grade, and I remember playing it, and you could create your own course, and to me, I'm like, oh, this isn't really a big deal. Like, you could do. I thought it was cool, but I didn't know exactly when the game came out either. And then in hindsight, and then looking at all the games that were out at that point in time, I'm like, that was actually some groundbreaking stuff for the times, and I think that kind of gets overlooked. And kudos to the developers for actually putting something like that in the game, because I'm sure the coding, it wasn't an easy task to do.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we have to give kudos to, like, OG developers for video games back then.
Yeah,
because they were literally paving the way.
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff didn't exist; they had to make it.
Yeah,
and Nintendo definitely deserves all the accolades they get for developing a system that created quality games, instead of like what Atari was doing, was just throwing out a bunch of stuff,
throwing shit at a wall and hoping it stuck.
Yeah, just float. Well, Nintendo was like, look, we need some nice sprites, some nice animations, some bright colors, solid frame rates, and a good presentation.
Super Retro Force.